Chapter 3 The Captains. Lewis realized almost from the beginning that he could not lead the expedition by himself. He needed someone to share the burdens. He needed someone he could trust. He needed a friend. Lewis thought of William Clark. Clark had been his commanding officer in the army. In the months that they were together, Lewis had grown to like Clark. He respected him. Lewis knew the Clark family. The Clarks had once lived in Albemarle County, Virginia. Lewis had been born in Albemarle County. He grew up there. On June 19, 1803, Lewis wrote to Clark. He told him of the expedition. He invited him to take part in it. He explained to Clark that President Jefferson had named him to lead the expedition, but he wanted Clark to share that leadership role with him. Lewis wanted Clark's rank to be equal to his own. Clark was at his Kentucky farm when he received Lewis's letter. He answered it the next day. The mails were slow in those days. Lewis did not receive Clark's reply until very late in July 1803. The letter brought the news that Lewis had been hoping for. Clark accepted Lewis's invitation. "I will cheerfully join you," Clark said, "and partake of the dangers, difficulties, and fatigues." With that letter, it became the Lewis and Clark expedition. The two names became forever linked. Today, as Stephen Ambrose has noted, most Americans think of them as Lewis and Clark. Meriwether Lewis was born near Charlottesville, Virginia, on August 18, 1774. He was named for his mother, Lucy Meriwether. Meriwether was the oldest boy born to Lucy and her husband, William Lewis. The Lewises had the Jeffersons as their neighbors. Thomas Jefferson was William Lewis's friend. When Meriwether Lewis was 3 years old, tragedy struck the family. His father died of pneumonia. Not long after, his mother remarried. The family moved to Georgia when Meriwether Lewis was 8 or 9. There, he learned to love the outdoors. As a young boy, he became an expert hunter. When Lewis was about 13, he returned to Virginia so he could get an education. There were no public schools in Virginia at the time. Parents sent their sons to private tutors. Usually, the tutors were preachers or parsons. Private tutors schooled Lewis for several years. When he had completed his studies, he planned to go to college, but his stepfather died. Lewis felt that it was his duty to stay at home and serve as head of the family. He took over the management of the family's 2,000-acre plantation. Meriwether Lewis was 20 years old when President George Washington sent out a call for troops. They were needed to put down an uprising of farmers in western Pennsylvania. The farmers refused to pay a whiskey tax. The revolt became known as the Whiskey Rebellion. Lewis volunteered. Not long after his enlistment, he wrote to his mother to say that he was quite delighted with a soldier's life. In the fall of 1795, Lewis was transferred to a rifle company made up of sharpshooters. The captain of the unit was William Clark. The red-haired Clark was 4 years older than Lewis. He had been born in Caroline County, Virginia. He was the 9th child of John and Anne Rogers Clark. When William Clark was 14, his family moved to Kentucky Plantation. He became a militiaman and took part in several campaigns against the Native Americans on the western border. Young William Clark impressed his commanding officers. A letter to his oldest brother from one of the officers declared, "Your brother William has gone out as a cadet with General Scott. He is a youth of solid and promising parts and as brave as Julius Caesar." In 1792, Clark joined the U.S. Army. He served as an officer under the command of General Anthony Wayne. Clark was with Wayne at the Battle of Fallen Timbers in 1794. The Native Americans were defeated, but 107 men from the U.S. Army were killed or wounded. The next year, Meriwether Lewis joined Clark's rifle company. Clark left the Army in 1796. He returned to the family plantation in Kentucky. There, in 1803, Clark received Lewis's letter asking him to join Lewis as a leader of the expedition. From the start, Lewis and Clark worked together as a team. There was no tension between them. Physically, the two men were much the same. Each was about 6 feet tall. Each was trim, strong, and broad-shouldered. Each could ride and hunt. Lewis was the quieter of the two men. He was more serious. He was somewhat moody. There were days that he liked to be by himself. Clark was more talkative and outgoing. He had a quick smile and an easygoing manner. Clark was more of a frontiersman than Lewis. He was at home in the backwoods, where he had spent much of his life. Clark was familiar with the habits of wild animals. He drew a little. He illustrated his journals with pictures of birds, fish, and animals. He also made the expedition's maps. Lewis was the expedition's naturalist. He wrote long descriptions of the plants and animals they saw. He collected plant, animal, and mineral specimens to be sent back to President Jefferson. When the expedition was underway, Clark would normally be found in the longboat in which the explorers traveled. He set the course. He supervised the men who did the rowing. Lewis often walked the shoreline, keeping the boat in view. His dog and his rifle were his only companions. The Lewis and Clark expedition was to become a great success story. In large part, that was due to the combined qualities of the two leaders. It was also due to their ability to work together so well.